we are joined with Dr. Jacqui Harrison from the Psychology Department at Bolton University. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Very good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How do these weird times find you?
Weird.
COVID.
The sun's shining and I can see it shining in your room through the window. So it's getting to that time of year where the sun's coming out. Spring is arriving. Spring is springing. So there's hope.
Exactly. It looks like there's a shining hope coming in, doesn't there?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for agreeing to talk to me today. What I want to do is talk about your educational journey, talk about how it's been for you, where you were, where you are now, and what the future looks like, or what you hope the future looks like.
Right.
Probably what we all thought our future looks like has changed from this last year, hasn't it? It's
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, we see it as we did see it as a short-term thing, but, it's just gone on, hasn't it? So it's kind of forced us to kind of regroup in a way and think about what we're going to do moving forwards. I think, education has changed slightly. I think it's been a positive thing, getting used to the online platforms and recording lectures, so I think it's, some positives will really come out of this, I hope.
Yeah. Well, I think whilst we're talking about this COVID situation, it might be worth just concentrating on that for the first part and then talking about your educational journey, because I think it has impacted on us so massively, hasn't it? How has it changed for you, your teaching?
It's made me explore much more. I've been much more adventurous in terms of what I'm delivering and how I'm delivering it, making use of the online stuff like the breakout rooms. And, actually what I try to think about is what would I do if I was in the main lecture theatre? Well, I'd probably go in a bit earlier. So I start my Zoom meetings a bit earlier so we can have a bit of a chit chat and a hello. And then I kind of wait around at the end, as we do in lecture theatres. We usually get students coming up to us at the end of the lecture asking questions. So what I've tried to do with my teaching is kind of use a similar process to what I would use if I was delivering it face to face, i.e. in real person. But I think it's made me a little bit more adventurous in terms of, I've never been a lecturer that's just been like transmit, just sit there and listen. I think it's made me appreciate how interactivity, particularly for students under COVID that want to go into breakout rooms and probably spend 5 minutes just having a little catch up, that they need that, as well as the kind of educational side of it. They need that interactive side of it as well. So it's made me consider that much more and the value of that in the learning experience. Not just that, but feedback from students as well, because to me education is a partnership. I want to partner my students in their educational journey, so feedback from them on how things pan out in lectures and if there's anything they want me to do that's different. And so yeah, it's made me more adventurous. It's made me listen even more to what students want, because now above all it's the time to listen to what students want. So I suppose that's been the impact it's had on me from an education perspective. Yeah,
I know from personal experience as well, you've taken that one step further, haven't you? You haven't just limited your time to your timetabled lectures or commitments. So tell me a little bit around what you've done and why.
Well, I think listening to students again, wanting that interaction, knowing how long they stay behind at the end of lectures to talk not just about the module and the educational stuff, but that interaction between themselves. So what I did was decided that every Friday at 5 o'clock, I would run a Zoom meeting for anyone and everyone, invite everyone to come along. Luckily, the numbers haven't been massive because I don't really know how everyone would speak over everyone else, probably breakout rooms, that kind of thing. But what I've done is listen to that need from students of having that interaction with each other, and set up this Friday evening kind of bring a brew, bring your pet, bring your kids, and let's have a chat. And we discuss lots of different topics. And I think for students that are on their own, and there are some students that are absolutely on their own, this is probably the only interaction that they'll have. And it helps, it promotes well-being when you know that you've got people there that you can talk to, like-minded people that are in a similar situation to you. It's a well-being initiative, if you want to call it that. But also it's nice for me to get to know students on that level as well, and for them to get to know me, more importantly, that we are human. We do, we are going through similar emotions and feelings that as you are, and sharing that and allowing them to share it. And that's so important, that I think that even if it just kind of promotes that sense of well-being in just a few students, then it's done its job. In addition to that, I do run additional educational stuff like the research methods surgery at 4 o'clock on Mondays, just for additional support for students. And that is really relaxed, because I think what students want is, yes, they want the interaction, they want to attend the lectures, but they also want a more relaxed scenario as well, where they can speak and interact. So that's what I've done. Yeah,
I think it's absolutely commendable that you've listened and you've kind of observed and have put something in place. And it is now down to students whether they want to sign in or not, but the opportunity is there.
But that's our job, isn't it, to listen to students, not just to impart knowledge and share our knowledge with them on their learning journey, but also to listen as well. It's so important to do that.
Of course it is. Well, somebody says you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay then, so let's think about you. Let's go right back to when you started on education. How were you in high school? Were you somebody who was incredibly studious? Did you have your path mapped out? What was your plans?
Oh, all I was interested in was riding my pony. I had a pony. I was lucky enough to have a pony. And that's all I really wanted to do. I got by at school. I wasn't particularly studious. I was really weak at the sciences, scientific thinking. Very weak at that. I was quite arty. I was good at drawing and the art subjects, writing stories, English, but geography, maths, oh my goodness, maths, nightmare. Sciences, physics, oh my goodness, couldn't get to grips with physics. So I just kind of scraped by with A levels, art, English, French, and general studies. And by the time I got to the end of A levels, I'd had enough. I didn't know what to do. So I decided to go to art college and do a foundation degree in art, which meant that you got a taster of everything you could do: sculpture, photography, fine art, painting, everything. And I found out that my strength was sculpture. I was really good at sculpture and quite good at painting. Although for anyone that knows about painting, it was very impressionistic, which means close up, it didn't really resemble anything. But when you step away from it, you could actually make something out. Yeah. So I was going to go to Falmouth College of Art, which is now the University of Falmouth, just do a degree in sculpture. And as during the summer of that final year, I was out on my horse at that time. Got a bigger one, a horse. And the guy whose stables I kept the horse in, his son was quite wealthy and lived in Belgium, and said, would you come and live in as my au pair in Belgium?
Wow.
But my mum wouldn't let me go for
Oh,
some reason. She said no. I mean, I was over 18. I could have chosen what to do. And she kind of talked me out of it. So I
did she say
decided I
why?
wanted. Sorry,
Did she say why?
I can't remember
No.
what the exact reason was.
Oh,
But I remember, like, my friends were allowed to go to rock festivals and things like that, and I was never. It never got off the ground with me. It was a very strange kind of childhood, I think, from what I recall, anyway. So I thought, right, well, I'm going to leave home. I can leave home, and I actually got a job, just in a place called Burstwick, just outside Hull, working in a stables as a groom with horses, race horses, proper thoroughbreds. And I loved that. I think that actually gave me a really strong work ethic, because I used to have to be up for 5:30, and go and sort the horses out, exercise them, groom them, feed them, clean all the tack, everything. And this was over the winter. I used to get on my bike, which I lived about 3 miles away. I rented a little room in a hall in a stately, more or less stately home. Rented this little room. And used to set off cycling down the country lanes. I mean, I'd be scared to do that now, but in those days, I just got on my bike and did it. And I did that for about 3 years. Over the summer, the horses always go out to graze. So the summer, I used to be employed elsewhere in the stables. I used to do things like varnishing the horse box, watering trees, really physical stuff. But I think it gave me that really strong work ethic.
yeah.
And then I realised I had to get a proper job, so I went and applied to work in health and safety, which I did, and that was quite a boring part of my year. But during that period, I decided to go and study. I wanted to get back into education. And so I went to evening classes just to see what was out there and how studying was going to kind of help me. And I got interested in psychology. I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And started reading around and thinking, I wouldn't mind doing a degree, going to university. So I'd actually moved over to Lancaster at that time. I was living in Lancaster for personal reasons. I'd moved over, and so I thought, oh, I'll just apply, see if I can get in. So I got in and did my degree, and then I went back out to work because getting a degree meant that I could move even further up in health and safety, and it's what I really enjoyed, and it was quite well paid at that time. And so I took some additional qualifications. And then went back to work and did that for quite a number of years.
How did you find your undergraduate degree? You were a tiny bit older by this point, so how did you find it?
Yeah, it was tough. It was really tough because a lot of the students were much younger than me, and I felt a little bit out of place. Although I never let that faze me, I did feel as though I shouldn't be there, that I was too old, that I was probably, nearer the age of their parents than I was then. But I still managed to make, some friends there, and I'm still in touch with quite a few of them. And it was really good. I found academically it was really tough because we didn't get a lot of support from the tutors. I remember going and knocking on a tutor's door and asking if I could discuss an essay title with them. And they just told me to go away and read. And I was absolutely devastated. I thought, I've plucked up the courage to knock on your door. And all you've done is, tell me to go away and read. I had a number of really negative incidents, particularly one research methods class. where I was made to feel really stupid. And it wasn't that I was stupid, it was that I was nervous. I didn't have any confidence. And I almost quit because of that. I almost quit my degree. It was towards the latter end of the first year, I think. And we were having to do things by hand. We didn't have SPSS in those days. And this tutor was quite strict. She was quite scary, actually. And she just came and stood and looked over my shoulder while I was doing this thing by hand. And I just froze. I couldn't do it. She was watching me and, of course, lacking confidence. And she just belittled me in front of the group. And, of course, being that little bit older as well, it kind of hit hard, you know, because I thought, you know, I took the courage to come here. What are you doing? Anyway, karma hit a few years later, but I'll tell you about that some other time when we get there, when we get to that stage.
Yeah. How do you think that experience has shaped you as a lecturer now?
Oh, massively, massively. You know, I think particularly ironically, I suppose, is, you know, the fact that I'm teaching research methods now to first years, second years, and the masters. You know, in a way that I would have liked to have been taught. So really, it was, you know, talk about getting a positive out of a negative. That has always stayed with me. And I tell students, I'm quite open about my experience because I think it's important for them to know. It's not a case of, oh, well, you know, I struggled and look where I am now. It's not that. It's a case of, yeah, I struggled, but with a bit of grit and determination, you can do it. Anybody can do it. It's not as complicated as you think it is.
What stopped you quitting then at the end of that end of that first year?
I think just talking to myself and just sheer determination. And I think my work ethic really helped me with that because I knew I'd been through that kind of really hard physical work environment where you weren't paid much. You had to work hard physically. I got a really strong sense of discipline. There was nobody around that kind of said, well, get back on the horse, literally get back into your research methods workshop. I just was very negative, was going to quit. And then I think, like most people, you either go one way or the other. I could either have quit or I could have gone, right, I'm going to show you. And it was luckily, right, I'm going to show you. So you've got that kind of, you know, crossroads, haven't you, when you come up against that negativity, to go either down, you know, the negative way and quit, or face it and fight it. And that's what I did.
So okay, so that's quite a traumatic experience, really. I'm thinking about my own experience. I don't know how I would have coped with that, because you're right, research methods is difficult, and to have somebody belittle you like that, you're right, you go one way or the other.
Yeah, it's awful. It really is. So that did really, when I moved to Bolton 14 years ago, I was because my master's was in research methods, it was automatically assumed that I would be teaching research methods because that was I actually did a master's in it as well. Yeah, so I was put into research methods, and I could see lots of Jacquies there in the group, you know, didn't have a clue or thought they didn't have a clue, overthinking it, being oversensitive towards it, because I won't say, you know, elements of imposter syndrome, but when you're dealing with first years, particularly mature students, there is that apprehension about how am I going to do. And I think research methods, the you know, word around the campfire tends to be, oh, it's hard, it's difficult, it's maths. It's not maths. It isn't maths. I'm rubbish at maths. I was rubbish at maths as a, you know, as a student at school. I couldn't get it. But part of the reason I couldn't get it was because I didn't have the right teacher, and B, I didn't have any confidence. So if you get the right teacher who will build up your confidence, then you're gonna survive. You're gonna do it.
So 3 years goes by, you do your degree. What happens after your undergraduate degree at Lancaster?
Yeah, well, I went back out to work because with the degree, I could work on a much higher level. So I thought, oh, I'll do that. And then I found out my son had a nut allergy. Now, bear in mind, I was travelling up and down the country, sometimes staying away with my job. And my son was in nursery at the time, and I thought, I don't really want to be doing this. If he has, an attack, and I'm, down in London or something, I can't be there. So I decided to quit my job and apply to do a PhD. Well, I'd still got contacts at my old university. And I kind of came up with an idea of what I'd like to do. And I went and approached one of the lecturers. And he said, yeah, sounds okay. What we need to do is apply for funding. So I had to apply to get funding from the Economic and Social Research Council. It wasn't university funding. It was a step higher. It was extremely competitive. And it was awarded on a point system. So your institution got so many points, your idea got so many points, and they kind of totted up the points. And the people who got the highest points would be awarded the funding. So we spent quite a long time. I was working in a call centre, and when I quit my job, I went to work in a local call centre just to get some money in while I was thinking about what to do. So I spent most of the time writing this proposal in conjunction with two lecturers, two professors at my old university, and blow me down, got it. Wow. So the idea is you get a studentship, which is enough money to support you, and then they pay your fees as well. It's not a great deal of money to live on, but it's better than nothing, and you can work as well. And so the idea is it was called a 1+3. So you had to do a master's first, and then you do 3 years PhD.
Oh, okay.
So I started the masters, but they were very sorry about this. They were very specific about the masters that I had to do. It had to be a masters that was approved by the Economic and Social Research Council. And because I was interested in developmental psychology, I wanted to do the developmental masters. But that one wasn't approved by the Economic and Social Research Council. The only one that was, drum roll, psychological research methods.
Oh, what did you think when you saw
that? Oh dear. So I thought, okay, well, if that's what I've got to do, that's what I'll have to do. Anyway, this is where I pick up on year one of my undergraduate. Yeah. So I did my master's, and I was a master's student. I didn't have any office space or anything like that. You just kind of go in, do your lectures, go home, do your work. But when you go from your master's to your PhD, they actually give you a desk with a computer. I mean, it's lovely. It's maybe, a smallish office with 4 of you crammed in, 4 desks and a bookshelf. But, you think, yes, I've got my piece of university here. It's mine. And I went in on the first day, got my keys. I was really excited about getting my keys. Chose my desk, got there really early so I could choose my desk. And I chose a desk where my back was to the door, so I couldn't actually see the door. So I was sitting there getting logged in and putting things in my drawers and stuff like that. And the door opened. And in walked this woman who had belittled me in the first year undergraduate research methods practical. She walked in, I looked at her, obviously she changed a bit since then. She looked a bit older. I don't think I'd changed much. And she came in, she said, oh, hello, I'm so-and-so, and held a hand out to shake a hand, which I thought was very formal, but shook her hand. And then we waited a minute, and she said, I really think I recognise you.
I recognise you.
I said, yeah. I said, you used to teach me. You taught me research methods many years ago now, but you taught me research methods. Oh, and I could see by her face, this was kind of, and then she said to me something really strange, which was I nice to you? Which I thought was a very strange thing to say. And I just said, no, actually, you weren't very nice at all. I almost quit. But I've had a career and look at where I am now. And you're actually still in the same place. You know? Not naturally, but you know, look how it kind of turned a negative into a positive, and I've had all that life experience. It wasn't said in a nasty way, but it was said in a way that would make her think about perhaps how she was treating students, because I understand she was still teaching research methods. And I just thought to myself, I wonder how many people have quit, you know, because of that.
What was the time difference then? So how many years had gone by?
Yeah, I think it's about 8 years. It was quite a long time.
And were you able to have a conversation with her? Was she interested to say, oh my gosh, what do you mean? Talk to me about that.
Oh, yeah, we talked about it. And I just said, you know, that the way that we treat people, we just have to be really careful, because, you know, we might meet them on the way back down, and they might just be able to help us on our way back up. And I think, you know, those kinds of lessons, those life lessons, are extremely important.
What did she say to you about it?
She was just apologetic, and I said, you know, I didn't pry too much, but she just said, I'm really sorry that I made you feel like that. And I said, well, yeah, you know, it would have been nice for you to have acknowledged that at the time, perhaps.
Or just not done it.
Or not, well, yeah, not done it, but I don't think she could stop herself. It was, you know, people who have positions of what they perceive to be power can sometimes be quite neglectful about the way that they treat people. And I think it's really important always to remember where you've come from and who you are and who you're with.
Absolutely.
And, you know, the potential for, you know, if it wasn't for certain people, supervisors that I had through my PhD, I would never have got through it. They taught me how to pass that baton on. And that's what I think I'm doing. It's like a bit of a relay race, that you pass it on and then they pass it on to someone else. So the impressions that you give, those messages that you send out, are essential, not just for the present, but for the future as well. So it's just always important to remember that. Crikey, we're getting profound, aren't we?
I think it's important. I think it's really important lessons, you know, listening to what you have to say. You know, you've gone through education a little bit older, which I think is interesting. Maybe that's given you a different perspective. I wonder if somebody younger would have been able to have the same journey you have. I don't know. But I think, you know, it is really important to understand from somebody who's been there, had that happen to them, and how you've come through it and how you now use
Yeah, it does build up resilience, that's for sure.
That's the one word I wrote down, resilience.
Yeah, because, you know, you need that in all jobs, in all areas of life. You're always going to have times in your life when you're going to have to be resilient. And I think, you know, if you can learn how to do that, if you can kind of absorb those coping strategies, you know, lessons learned and other important role models and how they cope, then I think you're part the way there. Because no matter who you are, you have to have a certain level of grit and resilience to get through anything. Everything's got the capacity to be really tough at some point.
So let's talk about your PhD. How did you find that journey?
Oh, yeah, it was it was an interesting journey. I had two supervisors, one who spent half of the year in Russia, in Moscow, because he came from Moscow University originally. Eugene Subotsky. He's now retired. And I wanted Eugene as my supervisor because I was his first and last PhD supervisor, but he was supervised by someone called Alexander Luria, who is a very famous Russian psychologist. And Alexander Luria was one of the contemporaries of Lev Vygotsky, who is, so it was quite an important pedigree for me to have Eugene as my supervisor, one half of my supervisor. And then the other half of my supervisory team was Professor Charlie Lewis,
Oh, wow.
who I think you might have heard of, who appears on one of the personality and developmental videos, actually, on Theory of Mind, a very young Professor Charlie Lewis, who actually lives just about 3 miles up the road from me. So we do keep in touch, although he's on the point of retiring now. But my journey was an interesting one because although Charlie and Eugene had very similar interest in developmental psychology, some of their theoretical viewpoints were slightly different. So I found it quite difficult at first. The very early stages of doing a PhD are really difficult because that's the point. Those first 3-6 months or even a year is ironing out what you want to do, how you're going to do it, and which direction you're going to take. And it can mean lots of toing and froing and deciding, you know, what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And that first 6 months for me was extremely confusing because Eugene would suggest one thing, Charlie would suggest another thing, and then Eugene would disappear and I'd have Charlie, you know, chatting to me and kind of bending his theoretical earlobe into mine. And that was a difficult, well, once it got going and I started collecting data, the data collection process went really quickly. I was going into schools because my the kids that I was testing were between the ages of 5 and 8. So I had lots of access to primary schools. I managed to get my data collected quite quickly, actually. And then, of course, it was the writing up phase. Now, I started working in Bolton towards the end of completing my PhD. I hadn't actually finished it back when I got the job at Bolton. Oh. So I was working at Bolton and completing my PhD at the same time, which was quite a challenge. But yeah, did it in the end, and it was a relief to do it and get it out of the way. And I'd been teaching at my PhD university for a couple of years. I was actually helping in research methods and doing all sorts of things like some PhD students do. But I wanted a full-time job, and a job came up at Bolton, and I got it. And I thought, well, I'll stay here for a few years, get some publications done, and then move on. And 14 years later, here I am.
How did you manage? I was just going back to your supervisors and the sort of conflicting advice and everything. How did you manage that?
With great difficulty. I mean, I remember at once, because their office doors were opposite one another. And I can remember in the very early days, knocking really quietly and kind of sneaking in, hoping the other one wouldn't hear me. It was as bad as that.
Really?
But in the end, I decided to look out for myself and stick with the supervisor that would actually get me through more effectively, which was Charlie Lewis. I mean, I think he'd supervised maybe 30 or 40 PhDs. He knew exactly what was the score with a thesis, whereas Eugene, it was his first. He was inspirational, Eugene. His meetings were socially quite difficult because he's not very forthcoming in terms of his persona. So that was quite difficult, but you know, his thinking and his ideas were just truly inspirational, and were just purely enjoyable to sit and listen to him. And then with Charlie, it was much more a two-way thing. He would be more challenging, he would question me, and you know, develop my critical thinking and challenge me all the way through, which really helped, you know, ask questions. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing it this way? What is your rationale?
Yeah.
So that when my thesis came to a close, it was pretty much watertight. So I think probably about halfway through, I made the decision to move more or less permanently over to Charlie, because I knew that he would be the one that would give me the right direction of getting through the Viva, for example. You know, once you've submitted your thesis, you sit down with two experts in the field, one from your university and one externally, and they spend, you know, a couple of hours asking you about your thesis and questioning you and challenging you. And you've got, you know, you've got to defend. It's called defending your thesis, the Viva Voce. So they challenge you and you have to defend it. And if you do a good job of defending it, then they will eventually award you your PhD. And sometimes they ask you to do corrections. If it's not 100%, they might maybe want a few more bits of research included that you hadn't included. So you get a certain length of time to do any corrections. Mine weren't massive. There were just one or two things, very minor things that I needed to do that I got finished in a few months. A few months sounds a long time, but when you're teaching as well, it was. So yeah, I took my time and did it right, submitted it, and then off you go.
Looking back, what was the hardest part of it?
Being alone. It's a very lonely journey doing a PhD. I liken it to walking into a cave and working in that cave on your own, only to emerge later on. I think when you're doing, whether it's a master's, you've always got other students around you that are doing the same thing, same assignment. When you are having to provide a unique contribution to psychology, you're a bit like a ship that's sailing across an ocean. And you've got to steer that. You've got to steer that ship with the advice of your supervisors. But I think that realization that I was on my own with this, in terms of, you know, because it's not something they give out lightly. It's something you have to work for. You know, it's not easy. So I think that realization of just how much creative and original thinking I had to generate myself to be worthy of that was the most difficult part, which was hit me quite early on that, actually. Like,
is there anything that you would like to change?
About what? The world, or well, definitely.
How much long time have we got? Let's not go down that path.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
you're right. More specific about your PhD. Is there anything looking back you think, I wish I'd done something different? You know, thinking about people who might be listening to this and going through the same process. Have you got any thoughts on how you would have done something different for the benefit of them?
I think I wouldn't have changed the topic, because the topic is endlessly fascinating. I would, on a practical level, I probably would have tried to write it up as I went along, which was always my aim. I was always determined that I was going to write each chapter up. When I did the study, I would write that study up, but I didn't. And I think that was my one regret, because I think if I'd done that, I wouldn't have had to spend so long when I was working actually writing up. It would have been more or less there. Right. But I think I got a bit lazy kind of towards the middle. And I think if I could change anything, I would have not been lazy and actually written up much more as I went along, instead of leaving it all. Not all of it, but most of it.
I don't really associate someone doing a PhD with the word lazy.
No, I think you get to the point where you get a bit overloaded. And there was a couple of points where I said, I can't do this. That was that kind of approach. I can't do it. It's too much. I can't do it. and that's when the resilience hit in again, and I overcame that. But I think anybody that does a PhD will have, if you know, will honestly say that there is a point along that journey, whether it's at the beginning or middle or end, where you actually say, I can't do it. And that's where you've got to be resilient to those feelings and get back on that horse.
And is that when it's important what your supervisor or who your supervisor is, the relationship you have with your supervisor?
Yeah, definitely. Your supervisor is, you know, absolutely essential, their approach. And I think it took Charlie quite a while to realise how I was flagging a bit. And then, but when he did realise, you know, he helped massively and helped to get me back on track. But without my own motivation to do that, I don't think he would have put as much effort in as he did, because he knew how much I'd hit this kind of brick wall really, and didn't know, and started panicking really. But his emails always ended, keep going. I'll always remember those words. So keep going. That was his thing.
So what would you advise a PhD student to speak to the supervisor more, to be honest, to what?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what they're there for, you know, and they've been through that experience. So your supervisor is going to be the first person to understand how you're feeling, and will help you to develop those coping strategies and those academic strategies for overcoming that brick wall, because there will be a stage where everybody hits that, and that is your supervisor's job, as well as to have those wonderfully enlightening discussions and those academic discussions where you discuss your thesis and where it's going. It's not just about that, it's about keeping you going as well, because we know what it's like, we've been there. And if we hadn't had someone there to kind of say keep going, then we probably wouldn't have done. It's a, you know, combination of the two. It's your motivation and determination. You know, I remember speaking to not my supervisor but someone else, another academic, and I remember him saying to me, I wonder how many people's half-written PhDs are still kind of stored in a suitcase on top of their wardrobe, because they haven't had that nudge, that support and motivation to do it. And I expect there's quite a few out there, because, you know, I think it's easier to walk away than it is to turn around and know that you've got to finish it. Yeah. But I think life's about not having regrets. And so if you, or limiting the number of regrets, I think everyone has regrets, but I think if you do turn around and grab it by the horns, then, you know, you're going to reduce the likelihood of having any regrets, i.e. quitting and regretting it, you know, because I think it would have been devastating for me to have had to quit.
Yeah, I think I would always rather regret something I've done rather than regret not doing something.
Yes, yeah, I think that's the point. Yeah. If you try and you do everything in your power to do it and it doesn't work out, then you're not going to have any regrets about that, really.
Yeah.
Because you did everything in your power. It's when you don't and you just give up, I think that's when regrets kick in. And I think, you know, having a good life, looking back on a good life, is limiting those regrets. We all have them, for one thing and another, whether it's personal, whether it's academic or whatever, there's always that. But I think if we can limit those, then, yeah, life's a better place.
So you've mentioned a couple of times now you've been at Bolton for, is it 4 years?
I have, yeah, unbelievable. It's just gone like that so quickly. I think essentially the ethos of the place hasn't changed. I think it's always been really student oriented right from the very beginning. And the nature of our students is such that they motivate you to kind of, you know, carry on. Now, I wouldn't like to work in any other university now. I hear stories about other institutions and how they operate, how they treat the students. And I wouldn't want that.
So you see your, well, you're currently at Bolton. Do you see your future staying at Bolton, or do you see? I mean, you say you wouldn't want to work for another institution, but does that mean that you definitely want?
Would it what? Sorry.
Does that mean that you definitely want? You don't see that in your immediate future?
I mean, nobody knows what the future's going to bring. You know, we all have choices. We all, you know, I don't know. I can't say. I mean, I'd like to think that I'd stay at Bolton because I like what I do there. But you know, who knows what's around the corner? I think we've always, you know, with life, I think it's important to keep an open mind. I like what I do. I'm good at what I do. I know I am because of the feedback I get, and I'm not just saying that, but you know, I get some good feedback, good results. But yeah, as long as I keep enjoying it, I don't see why I shouldn't stay there. I think you've got to enjoy it. It's so intensive, the work. It's, you know, it's not 9 to 5. It's beyond that. It's a vocation. It's not a job. It's a vocation. So I think if you enjoy it, then you can keep going. Yeah.
We've almost come full circle, really. So going back to like, well, the beginning when we're talking about now.
Yeah.
I think exactly what you've just said. You can't. I think last year has taught us that we can't necessarily plan because things can change at any time, can't they? We don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
How has the last year impacted on you? Not so much you as a teacher or you at the University of Bolton, but you personally. How has that impacted on you?
On a personal level, oh, it's been a nightmare not being able to go anywhere. You know, just going to the shops, you know, which is like 2 miles up the road. It's been a nightmare. It's been awful. And I mean, you know, the home life has been very tense because you can't get away from one another. I mean, that sounds awful, but I'm sure anybody listening to this will know what I mean. It's you know, all I can say is thank goodness for Netflix because that's kept me going. I've got a couple of hobbies. I've got chickens. The chickens have kept me going. I can always go and sit in the chicken coop. The chickens are actually under lockdown as well because of avian flu. So they're actually locked into their coop. So, you know, we're sharing the lockdown. So, yeah.
What else have you done to cope? You just mentioned hobbies.
Well, I've started needle felting. So I make animals out of wool using a needle, which I learned from YouTube. And I've had quite a lot of
artistic roots.
I think it does, you know, because I was thinking that the other day, because sculpture was my thing. I think I've probably retained that eye for you know, dimensions and you know, the animals that I make. I look at the skeletons and I make the wires, armatures in the shape of the skeleton to scale.
Wow.
And then you build the muscle, and then you build the top coat, which is the fur and the detail. So I think, yeah, I think that's helped, and I took to it quite quickly actually. But it's been really therapeutic sitting there with, you know, something on Netflix in the background, and really relaxing, just making these little animals or people I've made as well. Started off knitting and then it developed into needle felting. So, but yeah, it's just really motivating being able to do something like that.
And sort of switching off from the reality of such a busy work and workload.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I do about an hour a night.
Wow.
Which isn't a lot. you can't get a great deal done, but an hour is, you know, it's my routine. It's helped me keep a routine going. Although there is wool everywhere at the moment. So I've got to think about that when life gets back to normal, actually.
Whenever that is.
Whenever that is, yeah. I mean, I think the important thing for me has been the routine of being here in this room, ready to teach. Luckily, I've got quite a bit of teaching to do this semester. So, you know, I'm generally up here first thing. I have a routine. I go down for lunch and then I come back up and stay for as long as it takes to get everything done, and then go down, do my felting, and then
Relax.
off we go. Yeah. It is a routine, which I'm glad I've got, but it can get a little bit tedious, a little bit predictable. And I think what I'm missing is that, oh, come on, let's go and, you know, go up to Windermere for afternoon and, you know, we go out on a Saturday sometimes and sit in the car and have fish and chips on Morecambe Seafront. And that's kind of the highlight, you know. So it's made me appreciate the you know, these things are important.
I think it's
yeah,
quite grounding.
sorry?
It's quite grounding, really, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It just makes you appreciate how much freedom we did have before. You know, the idea of, I was thinking about the other day, going on a train, you know, standing up in those crowded trains,
Yeah.
you know, like sardines. And now we can't even go within 2 meters of anyone. So it's, I'm just hoping that one day we can get back to normal. Not that I love crowded trains, because I don't, but I think, you know, I watched a film the other day and it was New York, and there were all these people walking through the streets of New York, just so close together. And I thought, you won't be doing that anymore. So life has just changed completely, and it's it can drive you bonkers if you don't keep it in check.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Well, I think
Right.
come to an end. Is there any extra advice you give to a student going on this journey now? Is there anything you think I wish you knew when you started the journey?
I would say, don't let anybody put you down. You're on the degree course because you deserve to be there. The minute you hit a brick wall, seek advice. Don't sit there with your head in the sand. Ask for help, because there's always somebody out there to help you. And that's not just academically, that is on a personal level as well. Reach out. Don't spend your time staring at your screen. If it's not happening for you, walk away, get some help. I think Bolton's one of the best universities for supporting students. There is nothing we cannot sort out. So just speak to us. That's all I would say, on an academic and a personal level. That's so important. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's a perfect part to end on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.